The next series I will be talking about and spending a little bit more time around is The Law and the Promise. Now, this book is by Neville Goddard. I'll be taking you through some of my insights, analysis, and experiences regarding the understanding and insight into the law and the promise. This week, I will be kicking off the next series that we'll be exploring together, looking at insights and awarenesses, as well as some of the exercises from Neville's book, The Law and the Promise. I recommend that everybody actually reads this one along with me, because The Law and the Promise is actually an easier book for most people to read. It is a book that Neville speaks about the use of imagination and how faith and feeling and your visualization and the different processes that he talks about can be put to use. But I will formally do the next chapter next week, where I'm bringing in the teachings. For now, I want to talk to you as to why spend the time looking at the law and the promise. The first chapter is an introduction where Neville speaks how imagination creates reality and this principle that man is pure imagination. Now, there is enough out there. There is so much to correlate and corroborate with something that Neville was speaking about in the 1930s in terms of the span of the time of his work. Neville said throughout all of his works that life itself is an activity of imagination, and the world that we live in originates in our imagination, but not just any imagination. We are divine imagination. When Neville talks, I am, when he says that you should be realizing yourself as God. And this is why I'm going into the law and the promise. Not only is it about the use of imagination, but it talks about the law of assumption and how the many people who attended his lectures were able to shift and transform the issues they were having, whatever the situation might have been, whether it was a court case or it was a health issue or it was buying property, finding a partner, trying to figure out whether they were able, whether they were going to be able to support themselves. There are many case studies. There are at least, and if I'm there are many case studies. There are at least, and I'll look at it again, there are chapters in the book, and each one has what we would call in this day and age a testimonial, because people talked about their problem and how the use of the law of assumption and attending Neville's lectures actually helped them become better, helped them become greater. As I said, it is one of the easier books for you to read through. The case studies will help you get a different perspective and a reflection on what the person was dealing with and how they overcame it. And it will then help you to actually get a grasp of the law of assumption, understand how and why imagination works in a way that has many of these real life examples from many of Neville's students, people who attended his lectures. And we can then see how they applied themselves and how they learned to overcome their issues. Now, Neville encourages everyone to use their God-given gift of imagination consciously and constructively to improve their lives and the lives of others. Why is this so important? Because there is this thing that Neville talks about as well, which is the one. We are all part of the one. And in terms of oneness, what we do for ourselves, we do for another. What we do for someone else and how we think of them is what we are doing for ourselves or doing to ourselves. And therefore, you'll hear Neville talk about the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I have several videos on this so that you can understand why this golden rule is so important. It is the governance in terms of the law. And in my previous video, I spoke about it being the justice that sits within the law of assumption and how it governs manifestation. And it governs the other principles that we are aware of, whether it is the principle of correspondence, the law of attraction, the law of vibration, whatever. Whatever we do to one, we are doing to ourselves. What we do for another, we do for ourselves. And Neville emphasizes throughout his books as well that our future, humanity's future, is based on the use of the wonderful imagination that we have. It is the powerhouse of where we can create, or let me rephrase that. It is the powerhouse of our creation. And therefore, as individuals, what better thing than to learn to control the use of our imagination? Because to imagine the outcomes that we would love to have is to shape a better future. So, to this end, again, I've spoken about it. Neville teaches the law of assumption. We assume within our imagination that which we desire is already fulfilled. Another teaching of his is creation is finished. And what that means is everything that has ever been in existence, the past, the future, the present, everything is already done. We are the ones that become the resonance to, we are the law, or we are the power that attracts, that magnetizes those events, that brings those events into being in our lives. And choosing to have our wish fulfilled by assuming it is done talks about the law, which is the first part of the title of this book, and we will explore this in the next coming weeks. But Neville also speaks about becoming mentally and emotionally aligned with the state we wish to embody, which for the wish we would like to be to see fulfilled. And when you're aligned, you also sustain the mental and emotional embodiment of it. Because as we assume, an assumption is something that we have believed to be true without the evidence of it. So what we are doing is creating this in imagination. It is in the dimensionally larger world. Spoken about that as well. Thinking fourth dimensionally is a previous video I've done. When we assume something and we have it totally fused, within our imagination, we have the feeling state of it being real, that no matter what is going on outside of us, no matter what the 3D circumstances are, that we see it as done. We see that creation is already fulfilling. It has fulfilled that which we desire. And when we sustain that feeling, that's where feeling and faith are the same. Faith being the acceptance that it is done, the acceptance of the feeling of that state of consciousness. This is what we are always going to go back to. Because when we do that, when we stay true to that, when we are persistent, and we take consistent action with that, that is how we manifest. So Neville speaks to this as well. The secret is feeling, and the secret is to have that feeling so entrenched, so strong that we have abandoned ourselves to it, to that desire, mentally, emotionally, physically as well. We feel it already in our presence. We become that state, and we completely believe that it is real, that creation is finished. So faith plus love for the new state is required. We align our emotional state to become the person. We become the person emotionally who has achieved their desire before it shows up in the physical world. Because how often has it been that even though you may not want an outcome, but because your emotional state believed it to be true, it appeared in your world? Because we do not get that which we want. We get that which we are conscious of being. So therefore, Neville has repeated this throughout all of his texts, that we must persist in the feeling and take up occupancy of that imagined state so that we impress it into the subconscious mind. This is another hallmark of his work, SATS, or the state akin to sleep. Going into that drowsy state and bringing in the feeling, bringing in the emotional state, bringing in the feeling within the physical body that it is done. When that state is when we drop into that drowsy state of SATS, a state akin to sleep. You can do this just before going to sleep. You can do it when you meditate. But when you take that imprint into your subconscious mind because you fully believe it. Now, the subconscious mind does not make a distinction between what has happened and what is to happen. And therefore, you are the operant power. You operate the law of assumption. You assume it to be real. You persist in that feeling. This feeling is the secret. You think fourth dimensionally. And what do? As above, so below. As within, so without. You become that which is that your desire is already complete. So repetition serves to underscore the imaginal changes that are not yet concrete. So you are the instrument in this. Now, in terms of the law of assumption, another important part is the process of revising, revision of negative past experiences in our imagination, taking that state into sleep as well, where you revise your day. Neville says when one truly learns how to revise, they will finally understand how they can influence the past and the future, because we drop the story of the past and we no longer create from the past, so that the future is not determined by the cause and the effect that has already been the state that we embodied. So we reimagine, we rewrite scenes differently to the ones that we are maybe caught up in, the ones that we're limiting, the ones we did not enjoy. Revision is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful process, and it is something that Neville says to us to always do on a daily basis. I have a 4-part masterclass on this that is available. I also offer one-on-one sessions where we go through 4 weeks of you learning how to apply revision step by step. And we will revise certain aspects that you may find challenging and not know how to revise yourself. Now, the other important hallmarks of Neville's works are self-concept, which is the identity that we take on, whatever we believe to be true, and whatever we believe to be true about the past, about ourselves, about others, about experiences. I also offer programs around this and one-on-one sessions so that if you're stuck, you can start to shift and change the identity that you are rooted in. Inner conversations, living in the end, knowing your desires are also hallmarks of Neville's work. And it is evident from the stories that people share in the Law and the Promise that will help you to start to see what part of Neville's works they were applying, which processes and principles they were applying so that they could get the results. I'm going to provide you with key points that you can identify this, and you will see how people have applied them. But before I close off, a significant part of the Law and the Promise is to reference the promise. Now, this is something that can be seen as Neville's spiritual awakening. And not just spiritual awakening, but awakened imagination. And Neville said it best, and how he experienced it and what we can experience ourselves is when you awaken to your imagination, when you awaken, when you realize the promise as well, what we do is control what's happening in the dimensionally larger world through the use of focused and controlled imagination, such that we control what is going on here in our physical world, which is just a shadow of what we're projecting into the world. Now, that for me is what got me really studying, reading, reflecting, taking classes, working with mentors so that I could get a better understanding, learn about how to be effective at applying the law, applying the different processes, the principles, the techniques. Now, everything I've touched on is either a principle, a process, a technique, and your attitude that needs to be realigned so that you get the optimal and the best results. Now, like I said, the Law and the Promise explains Neville Goddard's belief that imagination shapes your reality. Neville shows readers how to harness imagination's power to improve their lives by doing what? Living in the end, assuming the fulfillment of their desire from within, persisting, having faith in the unseen, reality, making the unknown known. We make the unknown known by seeing it in imagination and persisting in that scene, making it real, imprinting it into the subconscious mind. and feeling the wish fulfilled. I look forward to the series with you. It is, for me, 2024 is about enlightened expansion. I invite you to join me on this journey of enlightened expansion, because what I do for myself, I see for the rest of humanity, and what humanity experiences as well is what I want to see to be the best. So please, in this week, what are your thoughts, comments, observations? What are you getting out of this? Are you keen to start looking at the law and the promise? Look at it week by week in terms of each of the chapters. Let me know. And I'll see you in the next video.